No, no. It is about the exchange of financial information, financial messaging system involving central banks. Is it a SWIFT analog? Yes, it is identical to SWIFT. This will ensure international payments. It will ensure international trade. CNN Brazil is the next to have the floor. Daniel Rittner, editorial director, one of the most respectable Brazil journalists based on the Brazilian rating of media companies.
Thank you very much for such an opportunity. Firstly, I have to say that I have bad remembrances somehow of Kazan, because I came in 2018 for the World Cup for leisure, and I was so optimistic and confident with Neymar and the national team. We got eliminated, as you know, and I spent the whole night crying. So I'm speaking of Kazan because you are preparing so carefully the summit of the BRICS, and we in Brazil are also preparing very carefully another summit, which is the G20 in November. Brazil's government invited you to come to the G20, to the Leader Summit. However, the country's judicial power is completely independent, and many legal experts say it would be necessary to comply with the arrest warrant issued by International Court of Justice against yourself. In that regard, let me ask you three simple questions. Are you planning to go to the G20 in Rio in November? Secondly, in face of that, do you think that this situation that I described somehow shows the weakness of the BRICS before old organizations like the ICC? And thirdly, with all due respect, do you fear to get arrested in Brazil?
Firstly, the International Criminal Court is of no universal importance. It is one of international entities whose jurisdiction is not recognized by Russia, as is the case with many other countries of the world. I think the United States does not recognize it either, nor does China, Turkey. So the fact that such an entity exists, in essence, an independent entity like this exists, maybe it's not such a bad thing, but that it is universal, firstly. Secondly, such decisions can be circumvented easily, very easily. Suffice to sign an intergovernmental agreement, and the jurisdiction of the ICC will be restricted to it. We have very good relations with Brazil, stable. They have been lasting for decades. So, by and large, we can sign an intergovernmental agreement, and nobody will find themselves in a difficult situation. Now, as for the independence, I don't want to really make it look somber, but the International Criminal Court announced that they're going to take decisions with regard to certain political leaders of the Middle East. Later, the United States checked them, and they shut up. That's about it. The respect for an entity which is not universal, which is not independent, is quite low. It has a low profile, if I may. And the main part, we have a difficult situation. The Ukrainian crisis is far from being over. And, well, the main point, we realize G20 is a good forum. It is useful in general. If it is not politicized, if it is not overly politicized, there have been taken attempts, but it was initiated and not such a long time ago as a purely economic platform. If it goes down this path, it will be useful. but we realize what happens around Russia. I have good understanding. We have good friendly relations with President Lula. Will I go there on purpose to violate the operation of this forum, to ruin it? Even if we let aside the ICC, it will be the only topic for discussions. In fact, we will derail the G20 summit. Why would we do so? We are adults. We will find a person in Russia who will be able to represent the Russian interests in Brazil. Thank you. We are very careful about G20. Mr. President, we are careful about everyone, except for our enemies. Mr. President, you have mentioned the Ukrainian crisis. Just yesterday, while speaking at the European Union summit in Brussels, the expired President Zelensky said the only alternative to the Ukrainian accession to NATO would be to gain nuclear weapons. At the same time, the Bild edition published an interview with some anonymous Ukrainian technician who said Ukraine would need a couple of weeks only to build its own nuclear weapon and then to deal a strike on the Russian forces. What does it all mean? It's just another piece of provocation. To create a nuclear weapon in the modern world is not a difficult endeavor. I don't know if Ukraine is capable of it. It's not such an easy task, I mean, for the modern Ukraine. But in general, this is a doable thing because we know the scheme. It is a dangerous provocation because any step in this direction will face feedback. This is the second. And the third is that, and the main one, is that the political leadership of today's Ukraine has on multiple occasions, and even before the hot phase of the crisis, even prior to this, they made statements. Well, they were mild in their statements, but still they aired a view that Ukraine should have a nuclear weapon. These threats will entail relevant response with the Russian Federation. I will say it outright. Russia will not allow this to happen no matter what. Will it be or may it be that Ukraine has the nuclear weapon from the UK, for instance, like they wanted to have it, now they have it. There cannot be a conditional mood here. Let's not make guesswork, pointing fingers at the UK or any other country. It takes an effort to conceal this. I mean, there is radiation exposure and relevant maneuvers are required. You cannot conceal this like you cannot conceal a needle in a haystack. We can trace any movement in this direction. Saudi Arabia, please. Thank you, Mr. President. I want to correct a mistake of the interpreter. It is our bilateral decision. Mr. Nadim began the discussion. I would like to continue this discussion regarding the Ukraine crisis. You thanked Saudi Arabia for its stance, for its assistance in exchanging POWs with Ukraine. It is common understanding that there is strong friendship between Moscow and Riyadh. There is also friendship between Riyadh and Kiev, and Crown Prince in his Fox News interview said Saudi Arabia spares no effort in providing helping hand in addressing the crisis. Your take on the efforts of Saudi Arabia? Many BRICS members proposed ideas. You said Riyadh is close both to Russia and to Ukraine. Can Russia take part in a peace conference if it is hosted by a friendly country like Saudi Arabia until the end of this year? You said about friendly relations between Russia and Saudi Arabia. It is exactly what it is. We consider Saudi Arabia as a friendly state. We have good relations with both the king and friendly personal relations with Crown Prince. I know, and I'm sure that whatever Saudi Arabia does on this track, it does sincerely. No doubt here. So if such measures are organized in Saudi Arabia, the place, the venue is acceptable, would be acceptable to us. But that's not the point. The point is, what shall we discuss? As you are aware, in Turkey, in Istanbul, we have been negotiating for a while, whose outcome was a document initialed by the head of the Ukrainian delegation. He put his signature. The document is available. It is a draft treaty, and the excerpt is initialed by the head of the Ukrainian delegation. If Ukraine put their signature there, then they were satisfied on fundamental issues. We could have continued to discuss in details, but to thrash it completely, or rather trash it completely, would be a wrong thing to do. Otherwise, you could do the same with any document. We are ready to continue a dialogue to attain peace, but building on the document that was prepared for detailed discussions for many months and what was initialed by the Ukrainian side, we are ready to continue building on this.
And there is an initiative of China and Brazil. These countries have a well thought over attitude to that, and a group has been established in New York, and we treat that with attention and respect, and we know that all our friends, including the BRICS members, are set to conclude the conflict ASAP and by peaceful means. We are aware that definitely this is an irritant for the global affairs and for the European affairs and for the global economy. Like no other, Russia is interested to conclude it as soon as possible by peaceful means. We would be ready to come back. It was not us who stopped the negotiations. It was the Ukrainian side that said that we would not, they said, pursue more talks with Russia. And second, a decree by the Ukrainian president came out prohibiting talks with Russia, and it's still in place. Let him, in the first place, repeal that. And everybody calls on us to pursue talks, but the Ukrainian side banned negotiations with Russia. It's ridiculous. But the main point is the underpinnings, and the underpinnings would be that draft document that was agreed upon during this Istanbul negotiations process. And we have a queue from those wishing to ask a question. Emirates, then South Africa, and then Brazil. First, the UAE. Mr. President, your deep understanding and knowledge of military strategies is well known, and probably With respect to the conduct of the Russian army, decide that you have reached a victory in Ukraine. Well, you know, setting the timelines would be very difficult and counterproductive. Just now we have talked the possibility of peaceful talks, well, and I have said that we would be in favor given the certain conditions, and it's our most sincere and frank position. The sooner the better. And with respect to the military, to the army, today warfare has been rapidly changing, and means and ways of warfare because of the technological progress at the contemporary age and period of time. And it's very hard to assess what is going to happen today and tomorrow. Not long ago, it was said that the contemporary warfare was about the fight between technological solutions, and today I have heard from the people, military on the ground, that of the battlefield, that today's war is a war of mathematicians, because radio jamming and interference devices would be effective against certain delivery vehicles, and they would suppress them, and the other side has, for example, calculated and reckoned what is the counterforce and reprograms the software of its striking assets in a week or 3 weeks. The other side once again builds up their efforts and once again changes the jamming program and software, and it can go on forever. Well, the Ukrainian army on its own cannot do that, as neither can they, nor can they use long-range and high-precision delivery vehicles, because they don't have them at hand. It is all done by NATO professionals. But you know what the difference is? NATO is waging a war against us with the hands of the Ukrainian soldiers, and Ukraine spares no lives in the interests of third countries, but Ukraine on its own doesn't use high-tech weapons. NATO does that, and the Russian army wages a war on its own and creates military solutions on its own, and software also is done on its own. It's proprietary, and this is the big difference between us. Over the recent years, I have been witnessing that the Russian army has become one of the most combat effective and high-tech armies in the world. And when NATO will get tired of waging this war against us, I'll just ask them. We were ready to continue fighting, to continue the struggle, and we will have the upper hand. We'll win, we'll prevail. We will prevail. Please, South Africa.
Thank you, Mr. President. When I listen to some of the questions and some of the comments, I'm in a way very happy I stay in Cape Town, on the southernmost tip of the African continent, far away from many of these conflicts. But I also reflect on whether or not the world needs a Mandela moment, and whether BRICS and your leadership can provide that Mandela moment, because every war has to be followed by peace. That is a sine qua non of the world through the ages. And we have to always find the path to peace. Often the path to peace is not very easy, because it's not very obvious. It's also made a lot more difficult by the technological involvement in war today, in conflicts today, because in a way it dissociates people from the war, in a way, so to speak. But, Mr. President, my question is a contradictory one, because on the one hand, I think you are a peace lover, and you want peace. The Russian people want peace. The people in the Middle East want peace. The people in other parts of the world want peace. But just before we came into this meeting today, the Turkish foreign minister was meeting with a number of his counterparts, I think principally in the Middle East. And he made quite a serious statement. Turkish foreign minister said that there is an extremely high probability of a war between Israel and Iran. You may have or may not have seen that statement by the Turkish foreign minister. Of course, that would be devastating for the region and devastating for the world. My question is, what are your thoughts on this, Mr. President? Can you intervene, and what will you do as Russia? And what will BRICS do if this is to happen? Thank you.
This is a very dangerous and difficult situation you talked about. I have just responded to your colleague with respect to what has been happening on the Ukrainian track, and I has said that NATO wages a war with us, with the hands of the Ukrainian soldiers who use NATO military equipment, and we do both things on our own, and the difference is huge. NATO would not spare Ukraine, would fight till last Ukrainian standing. They cater to the American interests. But we should be thinking, and we are thinking about our own military, our own servicemen and our own equipment. And when we spare a thought for our people, we think about how to provide peace, and peace by peaceful means, inter alia. This is the difference. So this makes the difference, which is colossal. We do not issue decrees or acts that we ban negotiations. We say we are ready. With respect to the Iran and Israel, well, it's very acute also. If it ends up in a war, both soldiers will participate. We are in touch with Israel and Iran. We have confidential relations with both of these, and we would really want this infinite, as it may turn out, exchange of strikes be stopped at a certain point of time, and such ways to resolve the situation should be found that can be satisfactory for both parties. But this is always the domain of a trade-off. Can they reach a compromise? I think yes. No matter how hard it may seem, I think it is a possibility to entertain. Well, it is a very intricate topic, so just jumping ahead and making some public statements would be counterproductive currently, as it may damage the process. But anyway, the search for ways out is quite relevant. And if the warring parties are interested, we would be prepared to participate with all our sincerity, making allowances for both parties' interests. And as regards Iran, we have an allied relationship with Iran, and we can feel the subtleties of what has been going on there in Iran. And we know what has been happening in different spheres. And just listen. How shall I comment on what happened in Iran? I mean, the strikes from Israel, can one comment upon that? And on the other hand, we keep talking, and I emphasize that we are against any terrorist manifestations, including versus Israel and Israeli people. But still, I think, yes, a compromise is possible. And if it's relevant, we can be in touch with both of the parties to broker and do our best to help find a trade-off. In Brazil,
please get back to the 6-point peace plan proposed by China and Brazil. Would you consider to sit at the table and start negotiations on the terms proposed by China and Brazil? Besides, Mr. President, President Zelensky of Ukraine called the plan destructive and said President Lula of Brazil could be considered too much pro-Russia. That's his words. Would you consider Mr. Lula da Silva an ally? Do you think he can play a role in negotiations between Russia and Ukraine?
You know, the blueprint by China and Brazil and the relevant UN group and the plan, we did not know a thing about that. Neither Brazil nor China, those are very close countries to us, searching for a way out, a peaceful way out. They did not consult with us. They acted upon their own as they considered appropriate. Whether it's good or bad, it's another question, but it is a testimony of the fact that Brazil and China have been acting on their own, not playing into anyone's hands, including into Russia's hands. And I say that publicly and overtly. You can quote me on media. And our foreign minister reported to me from New York without any prior consultations with the Brazilians or the Chinese. It was like breaking news. And I believe these are well balanced, well thought over proposals in general, aiming at a peaceful solution. If someone does not like that, it is their position. And I have said that the Ukrainian side does not consider possible to entertain talks with us. They just set forth requirements and that's it. They were in talks with us. They stopped those talks after we preliminarily reached the agreements in Istanbul. Now they are reluctant. And recently the head of the Kiev regime, during his stay in New York State, stated publicly, "We will not pursue negotiations with Russia," he said. So what on earth is happening? Whether Kiev likes the Brazilian and the Chinese proposal or not, it's up to them. We have got to know this proposal after it was publicly unveiled. I think it is a good foundation to make attempts to find a peaceful solution. India.
Mr. President, my question is a kind of mix of some of the earlier questions. It relates to the Ukraine conflict. Some time back, you had suggested that that India, China, and Brazil could be potential mediators to bring an end to the conflict. Our Prime Minister Narendra Modi freely communicates with you, also with the Ukrainian president, also with the US. Do you feel that a potential mediation could exist in the near future?
You know, just now your colleague has asked the question about the Iran and Israel track, and I said that if our mediation is wanted, we will gladly work with the colleagues. Same refers to our friends. In particular, I mean the Prime Minister Modi. While talking with His Excellency over the phone, each time he raises this matter and expresses his considerations, and we are grateful to him for that. Well, where we start to round off, and the Emirates, please. Mr. President. I would also like to follow up on the Brazilian question. Mohammed Ben Said is coming to Russia shortly, and this is an important visit, and you had a good visit to Abu Dhabi before. And we talked the ICC and its activities. But what is of importance is that Mohammed bin Said went to the United States and discussed the technological cooperation with the USA. How are you looking at the UAE, that it's capable of building relationships with Iran, US, Russia, and cooperate with the ICC at the same time? Is it an instance of a policy that you would like to pursue? This is a very good example, and we have good standing relations with the President, and I hope that I'm sure that his visit will be very fruitful. Both the unofficial part, I will invite him to my place next door. We will dine and spend an evening together talking all the relevant matters. And indeed, the President of the UAE can and is able to support good relations with many partners, and this has its own intrinsic value. So we will wait and see. And the Saudi Arabia did a lot, helping with respect to the exchange of detainees, and we are in touch with the UAE on similar matters, and the economic ties have been developing, the trade has been growing. It's not as high as the one we have with China, which is 240 billion, but the trend is positive. And our investment fund is a success. These are specific matters of bilateral relations, but with respect to the Middle Eastern issues, we will be listening to the opinions of the UAE and their leadership, and we take that into consideration in our day-to-day policies. China, please. You have just mentioned a lot of matters related to security, and I am grateful to Your Excellency for the high profile that China has in Russia, and I mean the bilateral relations. And the Chinese MFA stated that President Xi is going to visit the Kazan summit. Under your leadership and the leadership of Xi Jinping, the bilateral ties are going through their best period. What is your vision for the future, mid-term and long-term future? The Russia-China relations are now very promising. no matter whether we mention the productive capability of China, our digital trade and commerce tools, and new dimensions, what are the main areas that bear a lot of promise in the bilateral ties? Well, we have been working actively in the energy, and we will continue doing so. We work on building 2 units of nuclear power plants in China, and we supply a lot of energy, oil and gas, and we will expand this cooperation. It's useful for us and for the Chinese friends of ours too. They receive a reliable source of energy that is not subject to any external influence, and this is a basic thing. We also expand agricultural interaction, and we are thankful to our Chinese friends that we are kind of opening up their market where it fits in their interests to let us supply produce like pork and some other products. These are conventional things, and we should be forward-looking, and one of the main areas here would be high-tech, also infrastructure, and the AI, biotech, genetics, and outer space exploration. Yes, indeed, in Saudi Arabia. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'm thankful to you for the time. Just 2 quick questions. The first is about Pavel Durov, that has several nationalities, that of France, of Russia, and of the UAE. We know what has happened to him of late, and what can Russia do to help him out? And the second question is about head of Iran's parliament. He made a bizarre statement. With respect to UN Security Council 1701 resolution implementation, he gave a negative comment on that during his intercourse with the French. What can Russia do within BRICS to improve relations between Israel and Iran? And is there a threat that this conflict will erupt into a serious standoff? The relationship between Iran and Israel is primarily to be patched up and built by Iran and Israel, and it is their prerogative, and we cannot interfere with the bilateral relations of 2 very respected Middle Eastern nations that have a big part to play there. With respect to the statement by the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, I don't think I'm in the position to comment on the statements by top officials of other countries. We have a good standing relationship, that of alliance, with Iran, and the situation now is tense. And now everybody is braced for possible strikes on the part of Israel, and I really hope that we are capable to avoid relapsing into this conflict relapsing into the open, and we would be prepared to do anything in case it is contemplated positively, so that finally peace should settle in Gaza and the cessation of those horrible strikes dealt against civilian targets. And also in the south of Lebanon, we want a normalization, and reciprocal and mutual strikes should come to an end. And also peace should engulf this area too. No one is interested in spiraling the conflict up, I think. neither for the grounds of security nor for economic grounds. I think that there are real chances to find a way out. Whether these chances are successful or not depends primarily on the direct participants, Egypt and then Russia, and then we will call it a day. Mr. President, thank you very much for the invitation. Would really like to talk about the bilateral relations of Russia and Egypt that has been progressing of late considerably. And your relationship with Sisi is propitious to that. There's been a lot of projects launched of late for the sake of development. What is your take on the future of these projects? And what is the picture of the future of the relations? Traditionally, we have very good, warm relations with Egypt for decades. Over the past years, thanks to President al-Sisi, it has our relationship has become very good, and we are now building a power plant, a nuclear power plant, and I am sure it's going to be implemented, and we are to be more active with respect to the industrial zone. And today, during the BRICS business summit, and the Egyptian president also mentioned that in his address, and we also have plans to develop machine engineering, which is a long-term project, which is to be characterized by industrial cooperation and a great deal of investments, and we will continue humanitarian and cultural interaction and personnel training and security cooperation also. I hope we will resume military and technical cooperation, and I believe an important thing is for us to coordinate positions at the international arena. Inter alia, the regional security matters. Mr. President, the tone of the West in on Ukraine has changed. Previously, they spoke about the mandatory victory and the battlefield solution, and now they are actively talking a possible territorial swap so that the remainder of Ukraine would accede to NATO. How do you like that? I don't know, what do you mean by a swap of the territory? The territories that our soldiers are fighting are Russian territories, the Lugansk, the Donetsk People's Republic, Zaporozhye and Kherson regions. This is number one. Number two, no doubt we should find a solution on the long-term guarantees for Russian security in the long run. So it should not be about a ceasefire lasting a week, a month or a year, so that the NATO members re-equip Ukraine, supplying munitions. We need a durable, lasting and firm peace with equal security of this crucial and complex process, and this is what we should strive for. And you know, when people talked about in the past about inflicting a strategic defeat on Russia and defeating Russia at the battlefield and gaining a victory for Ukraine, they now know it's not non-viable, it's unfeasible, and they have changed their mind. So I will praise them for that. Thank you. And we also have many questions, but the 2 hours time span has run out. We are so grateful to you for your patience and sincerity. We will not waste more of your time, and I have jotted down some of the important takeaways. BRICS is not an anti-Western entity, but a non-Western. It's not my quote, it's the quote by His Excellency Prime Minister Modi. And 30 nations are interested to cooperate with BRICS. Another takeaway there. It's not currently due to talk about a single currency, but we need a joint system of messages transfer and national currencies. The United States, you said, also is 15 years late, and BRICS is not trying to interfere with domestic affairs of other countries, but we treat everybody with care, and we will be triumphant. Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank you for moderating this meeting and organizing that, and I'd like to thank all the media representatives around the table for the joint work and for your interest in the BRICS operation. This entity has good, stable and sound prospects. My confidence is based on the fact that we have shared values and a shared understanding of how we should build relationships with each other if such countries as India, China, Russia, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and all the other BRICS participants, all in all 10 of them, and also those countries that show interest in dealing with BRICS, 30 of them in total. If everybody, all that bunch, is guided by this single set of principles and values, the entity will use it as solid underpinnings and will become an important pillar of the new global, multipolar, stable world order, providing for all the people's development. I'd like to thank you for this joint work, and let me express hope that it's not the last time that we meet. I hope that you or your representatives are attending the Kazan summit, and we'll do our utmost so that all the arrangements are top-notch. We are grateful to your press service also, Mr. President, that has treated us with care and consideration. And our final wish for today is a joint photo, a family photo with you. I'm ready. All BRICS nations, when new stakeholders emerge, full-fledged participants of an international entity, they bring in something new of their own, and so it is important that they should take into account
Уважаемые коллеги, господа, друзья, очень рад вас всех видеть. Наша компания расширяется. количество друзей и наших единомышленников в рамках объединения БРИКС возросло. Интерес к деятельности объединения очень большой. Мы уже, и я, и мои коллеги неоднократно об этом говорили. И, конечно, этот интерес растет, в том числе и благодаря вашей работе и вашей поддержке, информационному обеспечению нашей работы с моими коллегами и друзьями, руководителями государств, участников, членов БРИКС. Скоро саммит, в преддверии саммита состоится еще визит президента Объединенных Арабских Эмиратов, буквально послезавтра, да, приедет, будет у нас в воскресенье.
We will have a meeting right here, an informal dinner, and next day on Monday the official visit starts. And starting from Tuesday, the summit in Kazan is launched. So the agenda is huge, very busy, and in the course of our chairmanship over the past year, a lot has been done. If you have an interest, I will, in general terms, tell you about that. Only in general terms. I apologize because the information array is huge. Actually, one cannot keep all of that in one's mind because we have versatile, multifaceted cooperation in different areas, and definitely for each of these domains, probably you would be interested you would benefit from talking with the professionals that are in charge of those domains, but I hope you will have this opportunity, and as well as your colleagues and your subordinates during the forthcoming summit in Kazan. And that is probably all I wanted to say by means of introduction, and I yield over to you. I'll try to take as many of your questions as and to the extent that I have the knowledge for today's conversation. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. President. We are cordially grateful to you for finding in your very busiest schedule, finding time to have this meeting. And a testimony of the busy schedule of yours is that over those 4 days in Kazan, not only this summit will be held in a press conference, but more than 24 bilateral meetings, 17 actually, 17 bilateral meetings, around a score of meetings with leaders of other nations and top officials. And so this conversation that we are holding today is of significance for us personally and for the entire planet, because here we have the media outlets that cover the aggregate audience of several billion people, literally. And definitely we have questions the responses to which will be conveyed to our viewers, listeners and readers. And the first question I'd like to ask, a general one probably. Well, the world has been undergoing a rapid period of change, and sometimes we cannot keep up with the pace of change, and the world has changed a lot significantly. The transformation is significant. What are the signs of these changes, and what opportunities BRICS has in this respect? Well, the main sign of the changes is that new development centers are fledgling, and actually, according to different experts whom I trust, and I confer to their advice and defer to their advice and confer with them, so this development will be quite rapid in BRICS nations primarily. most importantly, the Global South and the Southeastern Asia and Africa. A positive growth will be witnessed in such powers as China, India, Russia, and Saudi Arabia. But the overriding growth of economies will be in the Southeastern Asia and in Africa due to several reasons. First of all, the development level of the countries with moderate pace of growth means that they have already reached a certain level in their development, and secondly, those countries with outperforming growth rates probably don't have the sufficient level of urbanization and very high birth rates. So these two factors will definitely help shape new economic powerhouses, and the political clout will follow for those nations. Definitely, with respect to BRICS member countries such as China, India, Brazil, South Africa, well, definitely the growth of their economies will go in parallel with the increase in their clout worldwide. This is natural. Well, actually, BRICS, as has been reiterated by my partners and friends and colleagues, comprises 45% of planet's population, 33% of land mass, and there has been a continuous growth in trade. I have just intervened before the BRICS Business Council, the entrepreneurs of our nations, and I have cited the figures I quoted before, so I don't have these numbers on me now. But if we look at 1992 and 2023 and compare them, the cumulative BRICS share in global GDP has doubled, and the share of G7 in global GDP has gone down, and BRICS nations already have outpaced G7, and by 2027 this lead in favor of BRICS will become even greater. This is obvious. This is evident. In some domains, the humanity cannot exist without BRICS countries. I mean the food supplies and energy, and also high tech too, like in the AI application. We gain more competences and acquire leadership in some of the domains and subdomains of that. So this is the most tangible change. This is natural. The world keeps changing always, and new leaders emerge. So this must be taken for granted with calm, and so we should build our relationships basing on that. And what distinguishes BRICS from other international groups? BRICS never was meant to against anyone. The Indian Prime Minister put it aptly of late. He has said that BRICS is not an anti-Western group, it's just a non-Western group. And this holds a lot of water, and BRICS does not counterpose itself to anyone. It is a group of nations that work in concert and have shared values and shared goals of development and take each other's interests into consideration. This will be the basis of our work in Kazan. Thank you, Mr. President. Indeed, BRICS nations make up 45% of the global population. Even if BRICS does not comprise the global majority, it still represents it, because many nations that are currently not in the group root for BRICS and support BRICS. And let me introduce Fan Yun, my colleague from China, editor-in-chief of CGTN, and deputy head of China's media corporation, Mr. Shen, also with him. And they will have the privilege to ask the first question, given your personal relationship with President Xi and the special relationship between Russia and China, and then we'll go clockwise. Mr. Fan, over to you. Your Excellency, Mr. President, it's my pleasure to represent the Chinese media today. The Kazan BRICS summit is the first one after the expansion, so we pay a lot of attention to that. As the role of BRICS nations keeps growing after its expansion, what shall be the benefit for its influence? What is your take on that? You have mentioned that the BRICS nations represent more than 33% of global population and landmass, and so what shall the contribution of these new members and BRICS by and large be for the entire world? Well, BRICS now comprises 10 nations, and each of these nations represents a lot of value and interest for the global community, and definitely for BRICS too. Each of these nations has its own culture and history, its own advantages in global labor distribution patterns. And dealing with these countries is beneficial for all BRICS nations. When new stakeholders emerge, full-fledged participants of an international entity, they bring in something new of their own, and so it is important that they should take into account the underlying principles of BRICS, initially comprised by 3 countries, Russia, India and China. We did that together, and the acronym RIC appeared in St. Pete, and afterwards it expanded. On the other hand, all the members should treat the new nation's interests with respect. In the course of the year, we have been putting our best foot forward to integrate smoothly all the new members into the operation of BRICS, and we have planned 250 events, various events in different spheres. 200 have already been conducted, 200 events. So it's not accidental that we admitted new members, and we knew them a lot, and we worked with them for a while, for quite a long while, and now we will be united under the same umbrella of BRICS. And so it's a good platform to exchange opinions and search for joint projects in various spheres, most importantly economic ones, but not only. People to people and humanitarian cultural ties matter a lot. Cinema and culture and youth exchanges in all these domains, we have been working hard in the course of the year, and real life has shown that we've been moving in the right direction, and we have made a proper, good step forward, the right step, expanding the makeup, and that will definitely increase the clout and profile of BRICS worldwide and its authority. Behind each of the new member countries, there's a group of their allies in this or that respect, and when a new member is accepted, all its allies look attentively what is happening in BRICS, and their interests towards joint work is on the rise. 30 countries as of today want to pursue more active cooperation with BRICS in this or that respect, acceding to the operation. So after the accession wave, a new wave comes which will enhance and increase the interest of others, but we should, together with the current members, contemplate and entertain the possibility of expansion. The doors are open. We are not barring anyone, and we will think about that and speak about that in Kazan with friends. So I yield to my colleague with pleasure from Sky News Arabia, Nadim Katech, one of the most renowned journalists of the Arab world. Tonight with Nadim, his program is titled "So Over to You, Nadim." Thank you very much, Mr. President, for this opportunity to have this interview. We represent Sky News Arabia. Before I ask my question, I want to say that your team has done a good job with respect to the arrangements for the meeting, and we're so glad that we can talk to you in earnest and openly and sincerely, although we don't know the Russian language and we have not censored the questions, no, so it's absolutely sincere. And Mr. President, you said on many occasions that the global world order should be reconfigured. It may not be easy, and we know that China and the United States have a role to play in that. What is Russia's take on this process? Doesn't Russia feel to be a junior partner to a certain extent in this interaction between the United States and China? Well, Russia and China have established a unique relationship, very confidential, and the trade and economic ties volume has been growing rapidly. According to our statistics, 226 or 228 billion. The Chinese say it's $240 billion of mutual trade, which is self-explanatory and self-evident. And I want to reiterate that the interaction of Russia and China at the international arena is one of the key factors of global strategic stability. This is also evident, and many nations share this view. Relationships with the People's Republic of China is built on the basis of taking each other's interests into consideration. We listened to one another like 5 to 6 to 7 years ago.
The Chinese leadership, the Chinese political government, and I had on multiple occasions a conversation with President Xi, the subject on balancing trade, and taking a thought what should be done in order for Russian industrial exports to be boosted for the Chinese market and for agriculture too. The Chinese side had relevant questions too on energy, on some other areas, on outer space cooperation. And we rectify every aspect. We hear each other. We give each other an ear. If you consider the trade balance structure, you will receive an answer. We are not just talking, we are doing. There are no seniors or juniors. We just work to promote each other's benefit, and we are successful, firstly. Now, on relations between the United States and China, we are not interfering. Likely, we do not interfere in relations. And we have colleagues here, they will realize immediately we do not interfere in relations between Egypt and Ethiopia. You must be aware of this. We are not meddling. Whenever there are difficulties, and if there is a thing where we can assist in addressing challenges or issues, we are ready to provide a helping hand. And if participants are interested in our participation as well. The world's biggest economy in terms of purchasing power parity, not based on individual income, is China. I mean, statistics tell us, with the United States ranking second, per capita, the United States ranks biggest, but consider the population of China, over 1 billion people compared to the population of the United States. The economy volume is bigger. India ranks fourth. Russia is a little ahead of Japan. The share of China, China is our #1 trade partner, but Russia's share grows. And now Russia's share, Russia ranks fourth in terms of the trade turnover with China, and it matters for everyone. We are very attentive in taking individual steps. Our Chinese counterparts buy Russian energy, which is the most reliable source. We have a common border. It is not subject to any fluctuations of global politics. And by the way, as far as the relationship between the United States and China is concerned, we do not need to cross borders. We do not need to use seas. We have a common border. As for energy from Russia, it is in fact limitless. If we can see the relationship of the United States and China, I think the United States needs to give it a thought. They have spoiled the relationship with Russia by imposing continuously sanctions, and it has a negative impact eventually on them. So the entire world is thinking whether dollar is worth using, considering that the United States, for political reasons, restricts the use of their currency as a universal international unit of payment. Now everyone is doubting this, and the volume of dollar is reducing, both in settlements and in reserves too. Consider traditional allies of the United States. Even they reduce their dollar reserves. Now China. One sanction follows another. It is not related to politics. It is because of the Chinese economy booming, and also because of an attempt to decelerate this growth by imposing various politically driven sanctions. Another point I would like to add here. The United States is late some 15 years. They will not be able to stop the Chinese development. It is an impossible task. It's like saying to the sun, do not rise. It will rise. There are objective economic processes. They are connected to a billion of factors. And this attempt to contain the development of China has a negative impact on the US economy. The competitivity of their commodities is lowering, and if they continue down this path, they will lose every competitiveness. That's how cooperation unfolded over the recent decades between the economy of the United States and China. It is interconnected, and everyone realizes it. But the actions that we see today taken by the United States of America, I think they are counterproductive in nature. But it is also related to security policy. I mean, by committing continuous provocations. Why are they doing this? I am often asking myself, whenever I see provocative actions in one region of the world or another region of the world, why are they doing this? Effectively, NATO and the Europeans are being dragged into Asia through NATO. And nobody's asking the Europeans whether they want to spoil their relationship with China, whether they want to use NATO entities to enter Asia and to create a situation that would cause concerns for the region, for China specifically. Still, they are being dragged, literally, like puppies, by a big angry person. They galvanized their allies there, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, into creating additional points of tension. They transfer rather dangerous weapons threatening Russia and China specifically. We follow these developments closely. We do not interfere. As we do not interfere in the relationship between Egypt and Ethiopia, for one, but the baseline of our assumption is that China is our strategic partner and ally. Thank you so much. But the force of BRICS is that there are no juniors or seniors and nobody interferes in another's relations. It's an important quality, an important tone within the grouping. Mr. President, a well-renowned international politics columnist representing Arab News newspaper, Faisal Abbas. Faisal, you have the floor, please.
أولاً نشكر لكم إتاحة هذه الفرصة.
Your Excellency, Mr. President, thank you for this opportunity to have a conversation on various subjects that are extremely important on the international scene. My question, as you are aware, is related to the fact that Saudi Arabia was invited to BRICS and the foreign ministers to take part in the Kazan summit. Mr. President, as you are aware, Crown Prince was busy starting last October with addressing the Middle Eastern situation and addressing the two-state solution in Palestine. Moscow has always supported this two-state solution principle. At the BRICS summit, there will be the UN Secretary General. What can we expect based on the results from the outcomes of this summit, and whether we can put an end to bloodshed in the Middle East, considering that there is complete consonance between all BRICS members to ensure the two-state solution for the Palestinian issue? When you said the ceasefire, you meant the Gaza Strip. Is my understanding correct? Well, our stance here is well known. Hardly will I be able to add much. The baseline of our position was that we need to put into practice the UN Security Council resolution on building two states, Israel and the state of Palestine. It is the root cause of all problems. And I'm confident this will deserve our attention during the BRICS summit. By the way, I invited the president of Palestine too, for him to take part in our events, and we'll be able to hear his position. Well, I had a lot of talks on this subject, both with the leadership of Israel and Saudi Arabia, and with the leadership of Palestine. In my opinion, it is impossible, and this is something that I clarify to our Israeli partners, it is impossible to address the Palestinian problem by building solely on economy. I mean, I know that the Israeli leadership, the current and the previous leadership, are of the opinion that it is just enough to satisfy some fundamental interests of the Palestinians living in these territories. And then the question will be over. In my opinion, in addition to just material concerns, there are aspects related to the spiritual domain, to history, to the aspirations of peoples living in certain territories. I think it is a much deeper idea and is more complex too. I think it deserves our efforts here. And secondly, we need to be based on a large and broad consensus. I do not intend to accuse the United States in every aspect here, but unfortunately, it was a wrong thing to do to disband the four. I mean, they are not to blame for everything, but the four countries was working, and as a format, it was working. They monopolized all the work, but eventually it failed. Unfortunately, maybe this quadrilateral format has to be restored. We need to discuss the restoration of the territories, the return of the people. The Palestinians will not leave. It is their territory. It is their land. Also, the more humanitarian problems we have, the more people there are who would be willing to uphold their interests. And the Israelis understand this too. And the position that I express now is something that many Israelis share as well. I have an opportunity to receive opinions in Israel. We're keeping in touch with Israel. We're keeping in touch with Palestine, naturally. Our stance is very much traditional, dating back to the Soviet Union era, which is, and I reiterate it, the main method to address the Palestinian issue is to create a full-fledged state of Palestine. Thank you. The next speaker, Dr. Iqbal Sugbe, Executive Chairperson of Independent Media, one of the most influential people of Africa. Independent Media is a part of his corporate entity and also the African News Agency. Dr. Surve worked with President Mandela. He is a steadfast supporter of BRICS. Dr. Surve, you have the floor. South Africa.
Excellency, Mr. President, firstly, congratulations on the summit. And it's really a pleasure and honor that we are here today. Mr. President, you are one of the pioneers of BRICS. As you've quite correctly said, you have been there from the inception. And you've also seen the development of BRICS from the initial BRICS to well, including South Africa, and then now the additional countries. Mr. President, I've had the pleasure of, being the chairman of the BRICS Business Council, and also the privilege of having met you during those engagements. And I'm a strong advocate for BRICS myself, but I get the sense that we have moved too slowly. And I get the sense that, in a way, that we may miss the valuable opportunity to ensure that the BRICS grouping becomes the preeminent grouping in the world. BRICS is very critical at this juncture in terms of where we find ourselves in world history. It's very important for the global south, or what Mr. Kislev has said as the global majority. And I think Russia has a very important role to play, and in particular yourself, Mr. President. My question is then very specifically to you. How can you and Russia hosting BRICS accelerate the mechanisms for BRICS to play a far more important role, one, economically, two, in payment systems, and three, which I think is important, in politically as well? Thank you, Mr. President.
Sorry. As for the political structure and system, your Egyptian colleague mentioned this part, but since we return to this subject, I will go back to his initial question. What he said was that I declare and we seek to rebuild the world order. It isn't our aspiration, in fact. It happens naturally. We just say that the process is inevitable. Hence, we need to respond correspondingly. New centers of power that emerge, they do emerge not because Western countries caused the Ukrainian crisis and everything is where we are. By way of reminder, in 2014, the Western countries, led by the United States, organized or supported, if they didn't organize, they supported a coup d'etat, and that was the starting point. And then for years, NATO was being driven towards this point, and they also started the war in 2014. Those who disagreed with the coup d'etat faced armed activities involving armed forces. That's when the war broke out in 2014. But the global changes started prior to this. They took large scale, and this is what we call building of a multipolar world. We just observe the fact that it is taking place. We contribute to this in a way to prevent destruction, but in order to ensure more and more constructivity and more creation. You say we need to be more active. How? I think making too much fuss is inappropriate. We're taking individual steps, one after another.
As regards the finance, we did not drop dollars in the dollars, the universal currency. It wasn't us. We were banned and barred from it, and now 95% of all the external trade of Russia is denominated in national currencies. They did it themselves with their own hands. They thought we would collapse. No, we haven't. Now we have new underpinnings. Now trade with China, 95% are the respective shares of ruble and RMB. And we also have been using RMB with third countries for settlements and payments, and definitely that plays into the hands of the Chinese currencies. status. China doesn't want to do anyone any harm, no. It's happening naturally. This is number one. So, settlements in national currencies. And we have established a bank headed by Madam Dilma Rousseff. And a lot is yet to be done. There is a need for a capital top-up. And we have met with Madam Governor several times. She's very professional. She knows what to do. So we should also establish an insurance arrangement, and the reserve arrangement for currencies. These should be operable instruments and tools, not lip service. And now we want to come up with, I will just say about that in general terms now, we want to come up with the discussion of the use of digital currencies in investment developments by BRICS member states inside the group, and also in the interests of other developing and emerging economies with good prospects. And we are to come up with a toolkit that will be under the supervision of the respective BRICS institutions. It may be another very good step in the development of the global south with our direct active engagement. We will be talking about that during the summit. We are already in consultations with the Chinese and the Indian friends, with the Brazilians also. We have had a round of consultations with South Africa. We'll talk about that definitely with everybody. We have been moving in this direction. But I think it's insufficient to be effective in economic development. We should reconcile our ideas. Well, the Christian and the Chinese traditional values and the Islamic values, in essence, if you translate them from one language to another, are very close or coinciding fully, as diplomats say. And people should become aware of that. So there are no enemies, only friends and like-minded countries. This is why we've been developing a respective program on museums and theatrical area. And this year, also in folk dance, we also have established a single platform in cinema, in theatre, in exhibitions. All that adds up, should add up, and will add up, I'm sure, to a very good foundation for bringing our people closer. We have been holding thematical years like youth years, theatrical years, or cultural exchange years with BRICS nations, which enhances confidence, which is what matters most. And this confidence and trust make the foundation for economic cooperation and security maintenance. So we will not be in haste, but we will make headway steadily, as quickly as appropriate, and we are to not to lose the momentum, definitely. Thank you, but actually it's about a common cultural market for the BRICS countries to be established that will be propitious to economic and security cooperation. Our Indian friend now, a very influential agency of India, PTI, Sudhakar Nair, has been with that agency for 45 years, starting with a line correspondent and now executive editor. He worked for the Prime Minister at the Prime Minister's pool and in Germany. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is my 6th visit to Moscow. as part of the coverage of leaders of India and Russia over a period of time. So my question relates to a point where you made a passing reference on the question of BRICS countries cooperating together in producing films. As you know, India has a very vibrant film industry. People of 30 years back, 40 years back, still remember some of the Indian films and songs. Will Russia give an opportunity to film producers from the BRICS countries to open their place and give some incentives for film shooting here?
Вы знаете,
You know, if we have a look at the BRICS member states in their totality, I think that in this country, the Indian films are most popular than anywhere else. We have a special TV channel with Indian movies shown round the clock. So we have a lot of interest in Indian films. This is number one. Number two, we hold BRICS film festivals, and this year the Moscow International Film Festival introduced all the tapes from BRICS countries, and the Saudi movie, the Egyptian, and the third country, Jordan, took the first three places: Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Jordan. So they were the winners. They took the prize places. As regards the economic side of the matter, cinema products and film industry is part of the economy and is to be duly regulated. India has made a lot of decisions to protect its own market, and it's not only about the film industry but also the automotive and other industries. But we are positive that if the Indian friends have this interest, we will find some common ground to promote the Indian films to the Russian market. And in a broad sense, at the market, it is very relevant and popular product. Alongside the pharmaceuticals, is going to be a very good undertaking. I'm ready to talk with our friend, the Prime Minister of India, when he arrives in Kazan. I'm sure we will come to terms 100%. No difficulties I observe there. Thank you, Mr. President. Actually, we would be fascinated to see not only Indian films, but those featuring BRICS countries' actors representing their cultures. An Indian actor, a Chinese, an Ethiopian actor. Well, you know, we discussed it with the colleagues from BRICS nations that we should organize a festival of theatrical art, and we established the Cinema Academy, and jointly we will pursue this track in future. And popular music festivals also need to be created, so there is an open field for work, and we'll be interested, and the media definitely outlets, I think, will gladly cover and participate. Well, in the USSR we had a movie titled Mimi No, where featuring a person from the Caucasus, a Russian and an ethnic Ukrainian, representing
Уважаемые коллеги, господа, друзья, очень рад вас всех видеть. Наша компания расширяется, количество друзей и наших единомышленников в рамках объединения БРИКС возросло. Интерес к деятельности объединения очень большой. Мы уже, и я, и мои коллеги неоднократно об этом говорили. И, конечно, этот интерес растет, в том числе и благодаря вашей работе и вашей поддержке, информационному обеспечению нашей работы с моими коллегами и друзьями, руководителями государств, участников, членов БРИКС. Скоро саммит, в преддверии саммита состоится еще визит президента Объединенных Арабских Эмиратов, буквально послезавтра, приедет, будет у нас в воскресенье.
We will have a meeting right here, an informal dinner, and next day on Monday the official visit starts. And starting from Tuesday, the summit in Kazan is launched. So the agenda is huge, very busy, and in the course of our chairmanship over the past year, a lot has been done. If you have an interest, I will, in general terms, tell you about that. Only in general terms. I apologize because the information array is huge. Actually, one cannot keep all of that in one's mind because we have versatile, multifaceted cooperation in different areas, and definitely for each of these domains, probably you would be interested you would benefit from talking with the professionals that are in charge of those domains, but I hope you will have this opportunity, and as well as your colleagues and your subordinates during the forthcoming summit in Kazan. And that is probably all I wanted to say by means of introduction, and I yield over to you. I'll try to take as many of your questions as and to the extent that I have the knowledge for today's conversation. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. President. We are cordially grateful to you for finding in your very busiest schedule, finding time to have this meeting. And a testimony of the busy schedule of yours is that over those 4 days in Kazan, not only this summit will be held in a press conference, but more than 24 bilateral meetings, 17 actually, 17 bilateral meetings, around a score of meetings with leaders of other nations and top officials. And so this conversation that we are holding today is of significance for us personally and for the entire planet, because here we have the media outlets that cover the aggregate audience of several billion people, literally. And definitely we have questions the responses to which will be conveyed to our viewers, listeners and readers. And the first question I'd like to ask, a general one probably. Well, the world has been undergoing a rapid period of change, and sometimes we cannot keep up with the pace of change, and the world has changed a lot significantly. The transformation is significant. What are the signs of these changes, and what opportunities BRICS has in this respect? Well, the main sign of the changes is that new development centers are fledgling, and actually, according to different experts whom I trust, and I confer to their advice and defer to their advice.